All right, welcome everybody. We're gonna get going here in just a few. We'll wait for folks to get going here. Looks like we are live on Instagram. Sweet. All right, well, welcome everybody. Today, joined by Diego Pinzon, and we're going to chat about transpersonal psychology. What is it? And the intersection of it between psychedelics. So, Diego, maybe we'll just start off. We'll just do a quick little intro. Who are you? For those that are joining in and may have not seen your face before. So, yeah, can you introduce yourself?
Thank you, Kyle. Thank you for having me. Well, my name is Diego, and I've been working with you guys with psychedelic students since I think Vital started, or a little bit before Vital with NAPSI. My background, I am originally from Colombia, currently living in Australia. And I studied an undergrad in psychological science here in Australia. And then I've always been interested in, consciousness, Eastern philosophies, religions, like Buddhism and so on, and also like psychedelics since like early adulthood. I will say that. So I did my undergrad in psychology, and because I couldn't find anything that was of interest here in Australia, there was everything here is more like a clinical psych, professional psychology, counseling psychology, not as much variety. I ended up studying at Sophia University, which used to be called the Institute of Transpersonal Psychology, the first school of transpersonal psychology, at least in Western psychology in the world. Which started by James Fadiman, one of the big names in psychedelics now and back then, back in the 60s. And yeah, I did my degree there, my master's in transpersonal psychology there. So that's how I got started more formally in transpersonal psychology and in psychedelics. Yeah, so we're going to talk about transpersonal psychology today. So there's a lot that we can dig in.
Yeah. Thanks for that intro. And for those that don't know, my name is Kyle Buller. I'm one of the co-founders here at Psychedelics today. Sophia was on my grad school list for a while. It was Sophia, CIS, Naropa, Pacifica. Really wanted to.
Naropa was in mine too.
Yeah, wanted to continue in that transpersonal lineage. And my undergrad was in transpersonal psychology as well, which was really cool to find a little unique program for an undergrad in transpersonal psych. They ended up changing it a little bit towards integrative, or what was it, integral psychology. So really focusing on Ken Wilber, but right. I focused on a lot of the transpersonal theorists. So for those that don't know what transpersonal psychology is, can you help define that and let us know what is transpersonal psychology?
Yeah, well, let's start with the fundamental, which is like understanding the word transpersonal, and it's divided between trans, which means something beyond or to go beyond, and personal, which might refer to you as an ego or an individual person isolated from from your environment, your spirituality and that kind of thing. So to me, transpersonal psychology is the study of a human being in a spiritual context, understanding the place of the human being in the universe, in the world, and also the study of non-ordinary states of consciousness, of extraordinary experiences. So I think to understand transpersonal psychology, it's good to look at a bit of the history to understand where it came from. And we can talk a little bit about that. So
yeah, let's dig into that. What is the history of transpersonal psychology? How did it start?
Yeah, to my knowledge and what I've learned is that in the 60s, I don't know particularly what years, there were a group of psychologists, and this includes, for example, Abraham Maslow, which is quite popular. Abraham Maslow, James Fadiman was part of this group as well. A person called Anthony Sutich, I believe that was his name, and a few others. Stan Grof, I think he was also one of them. they used to have meetings somewhere in the Bay Area, I
At
think. And then,
Stewich's house, and then I think they ended up having convening at Esalen. So Esalen started to become like a hotspot of what was called
right.
the human potential movement.
Yeah, this all happened at the same time in the 60s. And what was happening, this is my understanding, back in the day, it was like there was the dominant forces of Western psychology, which was behaviorism, I believe also cognitive psychology, and Maslow and Sutich said that we need to move on and see more of the human being, and humanistic psychology was created first, and out of that, there's a quote by Maslow. Of course, I don't remember it exactly, but Maslow said that humanistic psychology was like a stepping stone. It was like a transitional to go into transpersonal psychology, which is more broader and perhaps spiritual and universal, to include the spiritual dimensions of the human being. So these people got together and started developing the field. Anthony and Maslow, I think they co-founded the Journal of Humanistic Psychology, I think early 60s, and then late 60s, Sutich founded the Journal of Transpersonal Psychology, which was first published by the Institute of Transpersonal Psychology, which is now Sophia University. But you mentioned Esalen. I haven't been there before, but maybe you can tell us more about what was going on at Esalen. And
Yeah, Esalen was a little hotspot. I feel like it still is a hotspot. It's a retreat center, gathering place in Big Sur, California, right on the coast there. Really, really beautiful location. I was fortunate enough to go there once. I went there for a Revisioning Madness conference, which was pretty interesting and cool. But Esalen was just bringing together so many kind of unique people at the time, from like yogis to shamans to psychologists to physicists, scientists. And people were just kind of exploring. Again, kind of using that term, like the human potential movement. And a lot of things started to get birthed out of there. So for those that are in the psychological fields, may have heard of like Gestalt therapy. So Fritz Perl was there, and they started to develop Gestalt out of Esalen. For those that are familiar with Stan and Christina Groff, they developed holotropic breathwork out of Esalen. And then a few other things really started to emerge there. And so, yeah, I think they ended up moving, reconvening and starting to host some stuff there. And during that time, as I think you mentioned too, it was starting to get birthed out of this humanistic movement. And they were going back and forth, and they were trying to figure out a name for this new field of psychology. And I think they actually started to call it the transhumanistic psychology. And then I believe it was Groff and maybe Stewart. I always forget. But they were going back and forth about names, and Groff put forward transpersonal psychology, and they were calling that the fourth force of psychology at the time. Really starting to weave in, as you were mentioning, like the more spiritual aspects of human the human experience. I think the humanistic movement was bringing like the human experience to the forefront, but then also kind of missing some of the spiritual and mystical aspects of the human experience within psychology, and really trying to legitimize it in a sense, which I know is always really difficult when we're talking about spirituality, mystical experiences, psychedelic experiences. It's like, how do we measure these types of experiences? And that's why they started this, was to try to bring a little bit of rigor and science to try and understand these experiences. So I'm also curious, like, during your grad program, like what type of topics were you exploring? Everybody always asks me, like, what is transpersonal psychology? And it is very broad, right? Like there's so much to the human experience that can be studied. So I'm wondering, like, what were some classes that you were exploring during your grad program?
yeah, there's so many topics that I studied in my master's. I remember one of the big ones for me was a class on psychosynthesis, which is what you could call it psychology. I could call it a psychology of wholeness, moving towards wholeness. He was one of the first psychological models to understand the psyche as having different parts or sub-personalities. The modern, now there's IFS, internal family systems, but back then there was something called psychosynthesis, and it included the spiritual dimensions of the human being, as well as creating a map of the unconscious. It was created by this person called Roberto Assagioli, and he mapped the unconscious as having a higher unconscious, lower unconscious, middle unconscious. He introduced the concept of the higher self. So I think he laid down the foundations of modern approaches like IFS. Pretty sure we had a class on dreams. We had a class on Kabbalah, Jewish Kabbalah, which is a mystic system, spirituality of understanding God, the universe, from the Jewish tradition, which I guess is connected to our Western lineage. What else? We had a class on embodied inquiry. So it was a lot to do.
Cool.
Sophia had a big emphasis, and I really, really like this about Sophia in my master's program, that when you talk about spirituality, transpersonal, it all seems a bit airy, a bit like not grounded, perhaps. Sophia had an excellent approach, and that was embodied spirituality. So in embodied spirituality, we try and connect with our spiritual dimensions through our body. And we had a few classes related to this. One that I remember was embodied inquiry, and using our body and our felt sense as a source of knowledge and wisdom and understanding. So we did a lot of exercises with like listening to our body, asking questions, going out in nature. There was a lot of nature based approaches like eco psychology.
Yeah,
I remember the main text by eco psychology. The introductory paragraph kind of blew my mind because it said that it had this thesis that our psyche is not just here in our head, but our psyche is always connected with the earth and our environment, which you can tell this is very similar to how some indigenous peoples view themselves and the universe. And it says like, no wonder people are stressed and have anxiety, and their thoughts are coming in very fast. Like we're always in these very closed boxed environments, like our offices and our room. Like my office here is just like a big cube. Then I go and jump into my car, and it's another cube. It's another square. Everything's really closed. No wonder when we go into nature, we feel more expanded. So, something about Gaia and the psyche as the earth, and how our psyche is not separate from the land that we occupy, where we live in at the moment. So it was eco psychology was another big one. Those are the ones that I remember. It's quite a variety of topics, as you can see.
Yeah, and I think that's just helpful for people to kind of get a lay of the land of. It expands so many topics, right? And you can start to maybe focus in on one or two or three. So like I know during my undergrad, I really focused in on eco-psychology as well. That really grabbed my attention. And yeah, just being able to connect back with the earth. And I remember there was a Ralph Metzner essay in a book that I read that really caught my attention, just talking about how disconnected we are, and we're almost suffering from an amnesia because we're so disconnected from the earth. And just talking about how we also lack rites of passages in our culture, and how important that is for kind of human evolution, and especially from a psychological perspective. And I think some of the argument there was our society is almost stuck in an adolescence phase. And, to some degree, we could probably argue that, like just thinking about the way that we treat the world, do stuff versus like thinking about, other cultures and traditions might think about, like, I always love that kind of idea that we're actually borrowing the world from our grandchildren and the future generations versus all of this in front of me is for me, right? Versus
I love that.
We need to also store it for the future generations to come. And yeah, dreams, I did a lot of study in dreams and breath work and psychedelics, and yeah, so just thinking about the intersection here, since we're on psychedelics today to talk about psychedelics, What's the intersection here between transpersonal psychology and psychedelics?
So one thing I didn't mention before, to like give a bit of context to transpersonal psychology, is like, why were these psychologists interested in these experiences? So what was happening at the world at that time that it required some study, some serious people to look seriously into. So back in the 60s, I think there were two main factors, I will say. One will be, of course, experimentation with psychedelic substances, and how all these substances were, some were brought to like Western society, like psilocybin. Others were like actually discovered and synthesized, like LSD. And the other factor was that a lot of Eastern philosophies were being sort of imported to the West, like Buddhism, for example, and Hinduism and yoga, and all of these techniques of meditation and altered state of consciousness. It all came in a different language, in Sanskrit or whatever language it came in. So the West did not have a language to understand these altered states or transcendent states. So to study them, first we need to put some words that we can understand, and how to define it more clear. So we have psychedelics producing these wild altered states of consciousness, expanding our consciousness, and then we also have the Eastern philosophies. So this is how we can start to sort of trace the intersection between transpersonal psychology and psychedelics. The main thing, and then this is my view, is that we needed a map, we needed a conceptual framework, we needed some words to try and understand what was happening when we take a psychedelic, particularly in higher dosages, for example. How can we understand that? Because the experience can escape our language and can be ineffable, but we needed some maps. And for example, Groff is Stan Groff, for those who have not heard about, one of the biggest pioneers in transpersonal psychology. I will say a big significant part of his work is developing a new cartography of the psyche. So exploring inner space and starting to chart the unconscious. So yeah, I think that's my view. What do you think on that?
Yeah, I'm a little biased coming from the breathwork world and thinking about Stan's contributions to this field. And he was one of the main theorists of the transpersonal psychology movement. But could you go a little bit more into the cartography of the human psyche as he puts forth?
Yeah. So I was studying Groff a lot before my master's. And interestingly, I got into my master's, and I got to study more of it, like in an institution. So that was really cool. So what is the cartography of the psyche? So Stan Grof was a Czech psychiatrist who supervised, according to him, thousands of sessions on LSD, people taking LSD. He was a psychiatrist. He was doing experiments and doing psychedelic therapy. He laid down some of the foundations of the psychedelic model that we use now for therapy. So he started observing people's experiences, speaking to them, writing everything down, analyzing them, and he was saying like, "Whoa, I think there's a lot happening here that we do not have a language for, we do not understand, and I think we need to expand our maps. I think there's more than what Freud was speaking of the subconscious. I think there's a lot more." So he started including other models to understand the psyche. So we have the first layer of the psyche, which we all have access to, at least some access, which is our biography. What can remember of our lives. So people have this basic sort of standard level. But then he went deeper. He's like, well, actually, the psyche is also affected, and it exists when we are inside our mothers before being born. And I believe it was influenced by the work of Otto Rank, another psychologist that influenced Groff. So he started saying, well, people seem to have birth experiences when they take psychedelics, and experiences correlated to death. So he started charting what happens in these birth experiences, and he started to see patterns. those patterns, he divided them into 4, which he called basic perinatal matrices. And perinatal means around birth. So he started charting like, oh, what happens in the birth when you are inside your mother and before being born. He was saying the first of these perinatal matrices was that I don't remember the exact name that he used. What was BPM1? When the embryo is just floating in the amniotic liquid and everything is good. His experience in itself as a unity with the mother and everything's fine. I'm not sure if you remember the exact name for
BPM1 is yeah, I hate to use that term like good bad womb experience, but yeah, they called it like the anatomic universe, and good womb bad womb experiences. And so like a good womb experience, some of those archetypal feelings can really consist of this oceanic bliss or joy. So people feel like they could be floating in these oceans, just consumed by these very safe feelings. And then the quote unquote bad womb experience could be due to stress that the mother is going through, an illness, also any sort of substance use. And then that is, being fed to the fetus, right? And so that's impacting. And so an archetypal theme there could feel like being poisoned. So it might be in a psychedelic experience and feeling like you're just submerged in toxic waters, or it feels like you're being poisoned by something, or you feel like all of a sudden you have some sort of illness. And so hypochondriaism is like associated with that. But these are generalizations, and I don't know how you feel about the BPMs. I feel like there can be some evolution there instead of just sticking at it. I always like to say the map isn't the territory, but it can be super helpful for if these experiences arise. At least we have some language or some sort of theory to just explore, not necessarily say this is the reason why, this is what's happening to you, right? But if that resonates to you and you feel like you want to explore it more, there's at least a map there, but the map isn't the territory. So I always like to kind of preface with a little bit of that when I talk about some of this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And I totally agree. And what I get from these stages is that I call them experiential patterns, and what you have to do if you have these experiences is just to fully experience them so that you can move on. So anyways, going back to the cartography of the psyche, he started charting the process of birth until the baby is born, going through like a death rebirth experience. So that is the second layer for we. So we go from the biographical deeper into the perinatal, and then he added this other layer called the transpersonal layer, and this is where things get more interesting, and there can be connection with, for example, Jung's collective unconscious. You can have archetypal experiences in certain ways, spiritual experiences. Groff he actually wrote quite a list of all the types of transpersonal experiences that can happen, like experiences where time is bent, where you experience your consciousness can identify with like animals or with like plants, or with like you can experience things like telepathy and all these sort of experiences that I will say go beyond the Cartesian understanding of life, of the world, of the universe, and can challenge our understanding of how the world works, and what is possible, what is not possible. Really interestingly, I was listening to a podcast.
Telepathy tapes.
What was that?
The telepathy tapes. I don't know. Everybody's been talking about that recently.
Yes, the telepathy tapes, like experiments of like these children that has been diagnosed with autism that actually have crazy telepathy abilities. So this is another thing that transpersonal psychology can study, or parapsychology. All of these phenomena that some people claim to happen sometimes in expanded states and in psychedelic experiences. So what Groff created was this expanded model of the psyche, or map, or cartography, that he was saying like we should not just subscribe to one model, but we should be open to expanding our model of the psyche, and there can be more. And again, as you said, this is just a map. It's not the territory. I think our words can escape what's really going on and how we see the universe. As we know, humans have a nervous system that is sort of like pre-configured to see the world and perceive the world in a certain way, so that we can survive and navigate through the space based on survival. That's how neuroscience understands how our nervous system developed. And other beings can see more colors, can see things that we cannot see. And even in these telepathy tapes podcast, it was quite amazing. These children were able to see things that other people could not see. So yeah, this is why we wanted the expanded cartography of the psyche.
Yeah. And for those that are tuning in, I'd love to hear if you've listened to that podcast, Telepathy Tapes. I've only gotten, I think, through episode 1 or 2. I need to finish it, but everybody's talking about it, and it sounds really, really interesting, because that does kind of go against our kind of mechanistic Newtonian Cartesian paradigm, right? I know they're talking about how some of these kids can read minds, right, and communicate by reading minds, and that goes beyond anything science can really kind of like measure and try to understand. And so what happens when we have these experiences, and I think it's really important, Groff and others expanding the cartography and kind of bringing these experiences to light and trying to develop frameworks and language around it, because sometimes when we have these experiences, we can feel so alone, and like so afraid of like, am I going crazy right now? Like, I just had this experience. What's going on? And when I think about that, I just think about the framework of like spiritual emergencies, which is a whole topic that we could get into. But, I think a lot of these psycho-spiritual crises that unfold, whether it's brought on spontaneously through psychedelics, through breath work, through meditation, through yoga, when we are opening up all these channels inside of us, and then we have this, and then we live in a world where we feel like we're kind of going crazy. And I think the transpersonal movement is just really has been trying to normalize that this is a wide range of human experience. And it's not, as you were kind of saying before, like putting it in a box, right? And saying like, this is how we view the world. And this is how the world should be. But there's so many different ways people perceive and experience the world. And do we have the maps for it? And so, yeah, I'm glad that a lot of of the folks in the transpersonal paradigm have been trying to just develop language and maps for people to, I think, feel a little bit safer, or maybe just more grounded when it feels like things are really falling apart. And I know for me, when I had my snowboarding accident and had this really profound near-death experience, I mean, I thought I was just losing it. And that's how I ended up getting to transpersonal psychology. I came across some of the transpersonal books and literature, and I said, I got to dedicate my life studying this stuff, because like what I just experienced, I feel like I'm kind of going a little crazy in a world that maybe doesn't have a framework to explore these kind of spiritual experiences, these mystical experiences. And, I think the more that we can help to just validate these types of experiences, people feel less alone, right, in the world. It's like, oh, somebody else can understand this. And I remember you brought up eco-psychology. It was my teacher, Michael Watson, who was teaching an eco-psychology program at Burlington College. And I remember just being blown away after this class. And I'm like, oh, I really got to like go up and share my story with him after class. So I asked him, do you have any time? I just want to like share my story with you. And I was sharing about my near-death experience and some of these psychedelic experiences, and some of these just like really profound things that were happened to me. I remember he looked at me and he said, if you lived in a traditional culture, the elders would have stepped in and taught you this new way of seeing the world and this new way of being in the world. And that was probably the first time, like I was 22 since I was 16, that I felt so heard and seen. I was like, oh, wait.
Wow.
Somebody else can understand this. Like, and I went to like a therapist one time and just got shamed for, exploring psychedelics and being really open about it and saying like how therapeutic it was. And they just like, shamed me for it, and coming to a place of like, oh, wow, like other cultures, other traditions might have another framework for understanding these types of experiences. And I just remember feeling like, I need to be here. Like this is this is where I need to be, because I'm
Yeah.
surrounded by people that can like understand it, right? And that's so important. And especially now that more and more people are starting to open up and have psychedelic experiences and be more vocal about it. I was just watching a little clip on it just popped up on social media. Jimmy Kimmel, I forget who the guest was, but they were talking about their
Oh
ayahuasca
wow.
experience, you
No
know.
way.
And it's like, this stuff is starting to hit more mainstream news outlets and channels, and people are starting to become curious. And how do we help to provide, I guess, a framework for people to understand these deep, profound experiences when they come back to a community, to friends, peers, to loved ones that may not understand it? That can also be, that's like probably one of the biggest integration challenges for a lot of folks, is coming back to a place and not feeling understood, not feeling heard or seen or anything like that.
Yeah, that's a big one, and I wanted to share something I've learned just through my own journey. And for example, studying a psychological science from a Western point of view, and then transpersonal psychology, and being also very immersed in like Buddhism and Taoism and that kind of philosophies. And is that we all come to the world, when we're born, we don't really have a map to see the world, right? We don't have the words, we don't know what the world is, we don't know what anything is. And then our parents, our society, our school, the religion, if you're given a religion, you start putting on lenses through which you see the world, right? And these lenses start shaping how you see reality, but they also act as filters. So usually what happens is that you start filtering out anything that does not conform to your beliefs, so that lenses that you were given by, since childhood, by your parents, what they told you what to believe, or what religion told you to believe, your school or your friends, or what's in television, or the things that you read. So like, it's really important to recognize that our culture has its own blind spots and its own biases. And why I wanted to share this is that just through my own journey, I've been seeing what are the biases in a Western paradigm. What is a reductionist view of the world, where the thing that exists is what we can measure, like reductionist materialism, which I think everything has its pros and cons. It has helped us advance science and physics and everything to like incredible, incredible things that we do now with technology. But inner space, our psyche, there's so much to explore, and it will be really sad to miss out just because it does not conform to the beliefs or these lenses that we've been given, to us, since we were children. Basically, that's something I wanted to share. So in our program Vital, we have many, I will say, diverse views that we include in psychedelics and psychedelic therapy. And transpersonal psychology is one of the something we want to show people. It's like, these are the models. We're not imposing anything, but we want to teach people a bit everything that we talked about, because it has a lot to do with personal development and with psychedelic practice. So yeah, I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, thank you for echoing that. And yeah, if you're enjoying this conversation, these are the types of conversations that we have within our Vital training program. And you can learn more at vitalpsychedelictraining.com. We have an upcoming cohort in May that'll be kicking off. But something I like to say is, like, with that program is just trying to help to create a cultural safety net for exceptional experience, for these psychedelic experiences, right? So I think as more people are starting to have these, really big experiences, again, it's like, what is the cultural container in which we're doing it in? And I think, the more that we can have these conversations, the more that people are educated about this stuff, we can go out there and support others that might be going through it. And I just remember when I first started my journey on this stuff, I thought I was like a weirdo within my friend group, like exploring all this stuff and with psychedelics and dreams and breath work and this and that. And then, a memory just popped in my head where I was hanging out with a group of friends. I didn't hang out with them all the time, but this one person started to share an experience that they had. And I remember them just saying, this is so profound. I haven't been able to talk about this with anybody because nobody will listen or understand. But like, I just feel really thankful that like you can understand this. And, just thinking about, if all of us could go out there and, be able to just explore this with folks so they don't feel so alone and afraid. And again, we have so much access to these states now than I think like ever before, especially with the internet. And, we're learning so much more, right? We're connecting, we're sharing stories, people are opening up. And the curiosity is going to be like, oh, like I kind of want to dive in and explore this. And so, yeah, just being able to provide that support for folks can be so huge, right?
Community. Yeah, I'm
yeah.
just thinking about all the. So part of my role with Vital is to lead study groups. So we meet weekly with a group of students, usually, 20 or under 20 students. And what happens is that a community is created along these concepts that we've been discussing, like the personal development, spirituality, psychedelics, and people who come to Vital from such diverse backgrounds. It's incredible, like doctors, lawyers, entrepreneurs, like business people. There's also, of course, like psychologists and therapists, but it's such a wide variety of people. And a lot of them come and say, like, I really miss this group because it's the only space where I can talk about all of these experiences and where I feel heard and understood. So people come to Vital without having that community. Then they create this community, along the 12 months where we have the program. And then they go out into the world with a community and they start sharing with others. So it's beautiful to see the transformative power of community and to having these private, intimate spaces where people can discuss all of this experience really. And when you have such intimate conversations, you form quite a strong bond with people. And it's not rare to see people coming out of Vital doing projects together and starting businesses together and collaborating.
It's really cool.
That sort of thing. So like, it's like a transpersonal community and union, because we're creating these connections between people just by holding space. What I'm doing in the study groups, I'm holding space, and the magic just happens. So that's quite a beautiful aspect, and perhaps something that has the value. It cannot be overstated. Yeah.
I'm so glad you emphasized that. And, I think about when we started putting Vital together, I really thought about my time at Burlington College and how special that was, because it was really a place to both explore on an intellectual and academic level, where it's like, I have these like ideas, I have these experiences, I don't know how to make sense of it. What does the literature say? But then, all these classes were also developed around inner work, self-awareness, cultivating our own practices. And, that's something else that we really try to focus on in Vital, is that inner work component, experiential learning. That's how we learn, and to dive deeper. And it's almost like I kind of used that time at Burlington College as a way to integrate all my experiences. It was like, whoa, I actually needed this experiential academic container to try to make sense of what was going on within my world. And I do feel like, that has kind of transmitted through Vital as well, with the study groups, the long-lasting connections people are forming. Watching people go on and collaborate on different projects and stuff. It's really exciting to know that, there's all those students that have graduated through the program now out there in the world, being of service and supporting their communities in so many different ways. I think that is a really special part of the program.
Yeah, the inner work component is also, it's huge. And I think it's something, this is what mainstream traditional education is missing. I think mainstream traditional education is just touching our intellect, our intellectual level. And so we have to learn this information, then we have to replicate it, like process it, analyze it, but we replicate it, but put it out in an exam, basically. what we do in Vital is profound whole person education. So what happens is you go through an inner transformation. As you mentioned, we have the inner work modules, and of course we work with the intellect, and we study philosophy, we study history, we study the biochemistry and pharmacology of psychedelics. But inner work is so important because the more work we do in ourselves, for those who want to, well, we will be better people in the world. Just to summarize it, that people who want to actually do psychedelic therapy or hold space or do ceremony or retreats, the more inner work you do, the better quality and the more space you can hold for people, because you've done all this work. And some psychedelic sites, everything's amplified, everyone becomes very, very sensitive and like hypersensitive to people's moods and energies and facial expressions and body languages. So inner work, it's very, very important, as you say, and something that's really, really good in Vital.
Yeah, there was a comment here on Instagram, and sorry everybody, multitasking is a thing, trying to do the conversation and try to keep up with some comments. So Kelsey, I don't know if you're still in there, but there's a comment in there saying, and integration once we're back and no longer feel resonance with old patterns, reconciling how to exist in the world once it no longer feels real or no longer feels important. And that is a statement, right? I think that is the challenge, is like what happens when, me and Joe like to use this term, ontological shock. A shock to our belief system, a shock to what we know to be true in the world. And then we come back to a culture, a community that just doesn't resonate anymore. Maybe, there's times where we feel like we're growing and want to go a different way, or just realize like, the job that I'm doing, or just this like, hustle culture that we live in, and just thinking about how broken all of the systems are, and then coming back and having to face all that, right? That's so challenging. And also just makes sometimes, I know I went through that, especially after my near-death experience, just then again, like that feeling of loneliness. Like, what can we do to make an impact and change this world if we don't feel like it resonates anymore? And I know it feels like we're entering into crazy times at the moment.
We are,
yeah. And like, how do these exceptional experiences help us like make change, inform like what is the world that we want to live in, and how do we bring that back? And sometimes that is challenging to then go make those changes in our life, whether it's job related, relationship related, all that stuff, right? That's a really big challenge of doing this work, is who am I after this experience, and how am I showing up?
Our personal narratives, I think they affect how we view the world and how we're going to act on it. And this is one of the big things psychedelics can show us, is how our ideas, what's in our mind, our own narratives are creating a reality all the time, because they determine how we act and how we view the world. So if we can change that, then we can change our reality. We can all be creators and co-creators in this world and make the world a better place for all of us to live.
Yeah. And I feel like, that is our goal, to try to inspire that change and get people out there to, create some action. I always come back to something Bucky Fuller said. And, sometimes when we have these really profound experiences, we get such big insights, right? And we might feel confused on how to come back and actually create change in our life. And I remember I was watching this documentary about integrating what they were calling spiritually transformative experiences. And there was a video of somebody talking about having a near-death experience. And I really resonated with this, where they felt like they saw their life purpose. And they're like, oh, I know why I'm here. I know what to do. And it felt so heavy, so big, and so overwhelming that they ended up collapsing into a depression because they just felt like they couldn't do that. And they felt like they came back here and failed. And that was really profound to hear. And I remember, having similar feelings during my younger years. But these psychedelic experiences, near-death experiences, dreams, and can happen spontaneous. It can feel really big and heavy sometimes, right? It's like, oh, this big purpose. So I always like to come back to Bucky Fuller, and Bucky Fuller said something along the lines of, we're here to make small local adjustments. We don't need to do anything big. We don't need to do all this stuff. But how do we come back and just make these small local adjustments in our communities and within ourselves, within, the group of people around us? And that small change will have ripple impacts over a longer period of time. So, even though we might get overwhelmed with the transpersonal visions, the transpersonal, the numinous, the ineffable, but also how do we come back here and make these small local adjustments in our lives? And I think that's what really matters at times, is these small adjustments.
Yeah. I love that you highlighted that. That's
Yeah.
that's the beginning of integration. It's more working with small steps. Yeah, one at a time.
Yeah. And I just saw Victoria here. I'll show the comment. Thanks for the shout out there, Victoria. PT and Vital are beacon in crazy times.
Right.
And I've felt that. I feel like this project, Vital, has, even though it is a big project at times, how grounding it's been through all the chaos that we've really kind of have ensued, especially since the pandemic. Like, I think for Joe and I, this has been a very kind of grounding project to work on. It's like, okay, this is what we're doing. And in Vital, right, like there were so many times I'm like, I don't want to teach class right now, I don't want to show up to study group, and I'd get there, I'm like, oh no, these are my people for this whole year. Like, this is my anchor for the week. Like, this is my community, and I love all these folks. They're awesome. So yeah, I think, again, emphasizing the importance of community and just how important it is to have a group of people to, explore together with and to be supported by.
Yeah, it's quite beautiful having that community for the entire year. Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I have to get going here. Realize I'm at the top of the hour. Diego, you want to close with anything?
Well, thank you for having me and having this conversation. I hope we do it again soon. And
will.
Explore vitalpsychedelictraining.com. Maybe I can announce to people we're launching a free intro to Vital course, so you can have a look to see what's Vital. We have some videos from some classes, little teasers. Just have a look at that. We'll be launching soon, hopefully. I think
by tomorrow. Yeah. For those that are watching on Monday here, and if you're watching the replay, hopefully by Tuesday, we'll have that up so you can dig in and get more of a feel of that. But we really try to embody that transpersonal perspective here in our learning together. So if anybody's interested, again, you can check that out at vitalpsychedelictraining.com. And we have applications open for our May cohort here. And I'm just going to highlight Aaron's comment here. Yeah, thank you, Aaron, for being here, and really great connection. So thanks for hanging out with us today and sharing all your comments. Really appreciate you engaging here. And for all those on Instagram too, I have two different screens. One's for Instagram, the other one, some of the other comments come through. So hoping everybody has a great week. And thanks for just spending some time with us today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you all. I'll see you next time.
All right. Take care, everybody. Have a good one.
Thank you, Kyle. Bye-bye.